I think we're live.
We are live. Look at that. Okay. Start seeing people popping up. Ooh, there's a hello already. Fantastic. Right, so just hanging on a moment until we start seeing the viewer numbers appear.
Yep.
Yep, we've got people watching. Fantastic. Right, well, hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this third in a series of webinars that I've done for Local Government Association in association with the Open Data Institute. And I'm here today at the ODI with Emily, and he's backing me up.
Hiya.
If you don't know who I am, I'm Lucy Knight, and I work in local government, Devon County Council. I'm a bit weird about data. I'm an Open Data Institute registered trainer. That's my credentials. This is why I'm presenting these. Hopefully you will find these useful, informative. Just checking everyone can see and hear okay. We've got comments saying everything is absolutely. Tim's getting in there. Like, I have to ask, okay? I'm just checking. He's making fun of me now, that's fine. Yeah, so I've introduced us. The structure today is we'll spend about 20 minutes looking at the e-learning module in question, which today is making the case for data. So about 20 minutes covering that and the points that that one makes, then another 40 minutes or so of comments, questions and discussion. So if you have a question at any time, just ask it. You can use the comment section on YouTube. So on the right hand side there's a chat window, so you can pop it in there. Or you can comment or ask questions through Knowledge Hub if you've got that open at the moment. And if either of those methods aren't working for you, haven't got those open, then you can also email training@theodi.org. Emily's monitoring that account, so she will let me know if anything pops up that way. Also, the LGA have asked that if you have any feedback at all about this webinar, about the module, about anything that you hear today, let them know. The address of that is transparency@local.gov.uk. Drop them a line and let them know what you think. The e-learning module that we're going to be looking at can be found here, lga.learndata.info. There's a whole set of modules. As I say, the one we're looking at today is making the case for data. So if everyone is ready, do we have any questions or comments before we get started, Emily?
Just people saying hello at the time being, but do feel free to put your comments and questions in as we go along. If I don't cover them straight away, it's because there's a more appropriate time for them to come up, but otherwise I'll feed them through to Lucy as they come through.
Excellent. Right, so we're going to get started, and I'm going to share my screen and we'll have a little look at the e-learning module and we'll talk about the main points that it covers. Right, so hopefully you will all be able to see what I can see, which is the top section of the module, making the case for data. So the reason for this module is what we're finding is that if you are looking to do things differently with data, it can be quite hard to convince people that this is a thing you should do, whether you're talking about something fairly small scale, like getting hold of a particular data set, cleaning up for sharing or for publishing, or whether you're talking about infrastructure changes like setting up a data warehouse or changing the way performance and analysis staff are managed. Anything in that area, it can be quite tricky. Data is not everybody's thing, especially if you're talking to decision makers who've got a broader remit. It may not be their thing at all. So your proposals do need to be very compelling and also plain English and talk about the benefits and the ways that it's going to help the wider organisation, so not just pitched from a technical, data-driven sort of viewpoint. And what's critical to remember here is that while proposals and options papers and the usual sort of mechanisms that we have for making a case for change, they have their place, but conversations kind of pave the way for getting started with that. So although we'll be talking about technical things to a degree, we'll be talking about data, this is still very much about people and about how you form those relationships and make those arguments in a way that shows that you understand where the other person's coming from. Now, I'm going to be talking not just in terms of open data, but all the data that the local authorities have got to manage, because it's still the case that sharing data, publishing data, getting the right sort of insights that we want from our data, it's still quite hard to do. It's still quite a complex thing to do. So just looking at across the board all the data that we have and that we manage, and it's not just give me your data and let me do stuff with it, but let's do better with our data. So quite a wide range. So whether it's about sharing data internally, whether it's about a specific data set you want, or big scale, I want to set up a data warehouse, which is quite a big ask, or if you're talking about just getting hold of a particular data set and publishing it, or whether you want to go the whole way and propose a data portal, or whether you want to just talk about the way that data is managed and the way that data people in the organisation talk to each other. We're going to try and keep it general enough that it covers that whole range. Making the case for doing something differently is very much about saying, here is what needs to be done, here are the ways in which it's going to improve stuff, so the benefits that arise out of that. My experience has been that when you're talking to people about making any kind of changes, that you also need to put in there some reassurance. Not just it's going to be great, but also it's going to be okay, we understand what your concerns might be and we've thought of that, and we know that we can do this safely, securely, efficiently, effectively, and so on. And the other thing about making this case and putting this pitch to people is that you want to make it quite clear what you want from them. You don't just want enthusiastic, oh yes, that sounds like a jolly good idea. You need something from them, and that needs to be made clear in your pitch as well. So this first bit of the module, and I'm not going to sort of scroll up and down and expand every single bit of this, because that tends to make people a bit seasick when they're watching elsewhere. But we're looking at actually structuring that pitch, identifying the different people you might need to make that pitch to, and tailoring it, because different people have different things they need to hear, different benefits, different concerns they might need reassurance on. So that's what we're going to cover. Excuse me. So just moving up a little bit to look at the components of this pitch. So like I said, you've got to talk about the problem that you're solving. So what's the thing that currently happens that's undesirable, that's unhelpful, that you think you can change? Second part is your proposal. What's it going to actually do? What's the benefit that people are going to see? Third part is some example of where this has been done before and it's worked, or something very like it has been done before and it's really made a difference. And I'll go into more detail on that later, but it really helps if it's as relevant as possible, so that people can't say, oh yeah, but that was different, we're not like them, we're a different type of authority, or we don't have that sort of structure. Make it as relevant as you possibly can. Fourth point you need to cover is why the thing that you're proposing is the best option. Not just, you know, I think it would be fun, or this would be really great to do, but actually this is the best possible thing we could do right now. And finally, as I said, the next thing that needs to happen, the action that you want from the person that you're talking to. So those are 5 critical components of this perfect pitch. So any questions or comments so far, Emily? No, nothing, okay. So I will just start moving on down to each bit in turn. So what problem are you solving? And you'll see if you're looking at what we're looking at on screen at the moment, that it describes this whole thing as an elevator pitch. If you're not familiar with that, it comes from the startup business environment, where the idea is you may one day find yourself getting into a lift with some important person who has some resource or some influence that you need to take advantage of. And you have maybe 90 seconds to convince this person to put their support behind you. So you've got 90 seconds, which really is not as long as you'd think, to clearly state your case and get that person on board and backing you. Now in local government, we have less elevator pitches and more, I call it the corridor pitch. You're far more likely to find yourself just bumping into the chief executive, or a service head, or finance people, or whatever, just in the corridor, on the way from one meeting to another, say, or standing in the queue at the shop. I don't know, that happens to me a fair bit. So I call it the corridor pitch, and you've got that very short space of time to make your case. And each part, so we'll go through each part in turn, start with the problem that you're actually looking to solve. And the sorts of things that making better use of data are going to solve. I've got a little list here. One is that reporting sometimes can be well behind in terms of, the data is 3 months old, 6 months old. You're lagging badly. So you can say how bad things were 6 months ago, but you can't say what's the situation right now. You might be looking to solve problems like it just takes too long to find the information that you need. You don't know who's got it, or you don't know what the latest version is, or you don't know what the cleanest version is of the data. And that feeds directly into stuff like not being able to respond effectively to complaints, or legal challenges, or freedom of information requests. We simply can't do a good enough job if we can't get our hands on the right data at the right time. There's something about if particularly finance data is not as easy to find or as interpret as it might be, is that we simply don't know what's going on with the budget, and that's obviously not acceptable. So that's a problem that everybody should want to be solved. And then there's something about reputation, or perception that the council simply doesn't know what it's doing because we don't back anything up with evidence. If we have the data to hand, then we can make the case and say, this is what we do, and this is why we do it. The evidence says that we should do it this way. If we can't do that, the perception is really, really poor for us as individual councils and as a sector. The perception is we're not very good at this. So those are some examples of the problems that you could say, this is the thing I actually want to tackle, I want to solve. And potential fraud is another one. Do we know where people are taking advantage of poor processes or poor data and getting services that they're not entitled to, that could be going elsewhere? So that's a range, and you may have a specific thing in mind already. You may already know exactly what your problem statement is, your value proposition, the thing that you want to fix. But that pitch should start with, this is the thing that's going wrong that my proposal, I think, will address. So just moving down to the next bit. And then this is about the benefits. What better use of data could do, what my proposal, this thing that I want to do, the change that it could make. And you'll see that we've got this. I'm not going to expand all of these and read them out to you. I'll leave this to you, sort of read them in your own time. But specifically, this is the part that needs to be tailored to the priorities and the concerns of the person that you're talking to. If you're going to talk about benefits, you could say to the chief executive, oh, it'll save, I don't know, a certain amount of money per year. And obviously he's got an interest in balancing the budget, but he's more likely to have, or she, in your case, ours is a he, may have strategic concerns. And actually he may be more interested in the reputational benefits or some partnership aspect, or something completely different. So each person you talk to is going to have a different set of benefits that are more likely to get them supportive and on board. The first on the list that we've got here is policy developers. And that might be actual policy strategy teams, it might be organisational development, or it might be your elected members themselves who are setting the direction of the council. And benefits for them are going to be stuff like the ability to set effective policy, evidence-based, evidence-driven policy, and also to use that data to focus on the areas of most concern, to prioritise resources where they're most needed. So that's one potential argument in favour. It's got, for the next one, heads of customer service, but I'm thinking more broadly just heads of service generally. We could be looking at some of the services where they're very much people-facing. They are supporting some of the most vulnerable people in residents, people in our communities. And better use of data is going to help with things like identifying unmet need and looking at areas where prevention is going to make a real difference, both to the quality of life of service users, but also to our budgets and our effectiveness at getting the right service to the right people before they end up in crisis, which obviously has got to be a good thing. Looking down a little further, so your performance managers and business analysts are the next group that the module mentions. Now, these are going to be data people, so I wouldn't have thought that better use of data was going to be a particularly hard sell. They're going to be on site. Whether they are prepared to commit resources and time to it is another thing, because resources are tight. But the sorts of benefits they're going to be interested in, obviously, better quality data, so that whatever they put up is reliable, is robust, faster reporting, that's an efficiency thing, but also it reflects well on that service, on performance management. If you can say, yes, we can do that for you quickly because we have our data under control, we have it to hand. Accurate metrics, again, if there's challenge, be able to say, no, our data is good, so we know the metrics we're looking at are good, we know we're measuring the right things. And what seems like an unattainable dream, but I'm sure we'll get there one day, stuff like real-time information. Some councils are doing this already really, really well. Really absolutely up-to-the-minute data that allows you to manage stuff like the high-res network gritting, for instance, and Birmingham will do stuff with temperature sensors, so they have an instant feedback and information about road conditions, about temperatures, and can think about getting the gritters out without having to wait for extra information that may take longer. And by then it may be too late to react properly. Now, next down on the list, you've got communications and PR people. My personal view is that actually having your data under control, managing it well and doing more with it is a positive story in its own right. But any story that we are trying to tell, any good news that we're trying to disseminate about the work that a council is doing is so much stronger if it's backed up with actual evidence. So if that data is good, it's up to date, it's robust, then using that to back up a story and saying, you know, we've done these good things, we're doing very well, we are helping people, we're delivering services, you know, we are saving money, whatever the story might be, if that's then backed up by, and here is the data that shows that we're not just spinning this, but actually this is true and this is real, that's a really strong benefit, a really strong case for doing that. The final section on this bit is about frontline staff. I've got a few others I'm going to go through, but for frontline staff, they don't need convincing of the benefits of having the right information to hand. They may not consider themselves to be data people, but if you're trying to get frontline staff on site, then the people who work literally customer facing, again dealing with very vulnerable people who need help as often as not, who certainly need support, and they need information. So frontline staff having the correct information to hand so they can allocate the right service, put people onto the right path, give people the information about who they should be talking to if it's not us, that sort of environment. Good data, good information is definitely a benefit from that point of view. Now, some other groups that I thought of that actually aren't in the module, but I had a little think about this when I was doing my prep. So one of those would be information governance is an absolute no-brainer. Again, if your information governance team aren't interested in keeping better track of data held in the organisation and security and access levels and whether or not it's personal data, if they're not interested in that as a benefit, then I would be astonished. They will be on site for that. And anything that reduces the burden on them, so for instance, repeatedly having to seek out who's got particular data to answer a freedom of information request, anything that reduces that administrative burden for them, so they can spend more time actually responding to the requester, is definitely going to be seen as a benefit. Another group we've got is procurement and finance. So better data management, simply put, is a better idea of where the money's going. Is it being spent effectively? Is it making that difference? Are we giving or spending our money with suppliers and service providers who are performing well? If your finance data and your procurement data are in good order, and the other data across the organisation similarly is in good order, sort of well tagged, and you've got that context around it that you can link it to the spend information, you have a much better chance of showing not just that the money has been spent and where, but whether or not it's making the difference it needs to make, whether we are making efficient use of resources. Carrying on down HR as an internal function. My experience of HR professionals inside Devon County Council and in other councils is that while they're happy to put out business as usual reports, and obviously the more up to date those are, the better, having really good information and benchmarking about staffing levels, about upcoming retirements, about skill levels, about what's going on with sickness and so on, means they can respond to those ad hoc requests that they will get. Certainly in areas like social care, there are concerns maybe that we could be looking at, they call it the retirement time bomb, where a large cohort of people are very highly skilled, very qualified people are likely to come out of the workforce with early retirement. And what do we do then? And that is the sort of thing that your HR professionals, right across the board, are going to be concerned about, are going to be looking at. New reporting requirements, or even just if there's some sort of crisis. We need to know what's going on with our workforce so that we can respond to need. And sometimes we don't get a lot of warning. So HR, definitely, that's a benefit for them. They would be interested in that. And the final group that I've got is ICT and your tech support, and whoever deals with your infrastructure, whether that's outsourced or in-house. If we are making more use of our data, but we are also managing our data better, and again, whether that's doing a better job of cleaning up our data so we can publish it, or whether that's just better management internally, then ICT have a range of issues around storage, around server space, around server load that you can help to reduce. Basically, just cutting out redundant storage because you haven't got multiple copies of things. And importantly as well, there's something around, I think it was about 10 years ago at Devon, that we were told that ICT would no longer be supporting access. And all the analysts just screamed, because access is what we use, where the systems that we're working with don't necessarily meet the need in terms of serving up the information in the view that we need at the time that we need it. We make ourselves these little access databases that fill the gap. So there are hundreds of the things. And if you expand that to the big complex Excel spreadsheets that we have, the ones with all the macros and the automated pivot tables and so on and so forth, they take up a huge amount of space. If we had our data in better order and the database systems that we use and the reporting and the extracts that we use were functioning more efficiently, we could reduce the need for that sort of thing, and that would make ICT very, very happy. Certainly talking to my friends in IT, that's definitely a bonus. Do shout out, because we had in the session this morning, somebody reminded us there was another group I haven't talked about. Who was it? Scrutiny, yes, thank you. So directly talking about elected members on scrutiny committees, they will have quite often a need for that ad hoc. I've seen the data that's been brought to this particular committee meeting, but I wonder, can I have last year's figures to compare it with? Or can I look at that, can we benchmark that against our statistical neighbours? Or can we slice that differently somehow? Or can I have that chart but in a slightly different arrangement? So having a better grip on our data generally means that we can respond to that sort of query much more quickly. And scrutiny members can have more confidence that we are definitely on top of things, we do know what's going on, and we do know what's happening. Okay, so take a break, swig my tea, and ask if there are any questions yet. No. Okay, and we'll move on to the next section. So I'm just going to scroll. Now in this module, we've got the using examples, where better use of data has helped. And we have put in some examples here, which again, I will leave for you to read for yourselves. I'm not going to sort of expand everything and read it to you. So you can take a look at these and see if any of those are relevant. But I will say that if you're looking for examples, and I think as I said earlier, make sure it's relevant to your authority type, because quite often when you talk about the benefits of doing something in a certain way and then say, oh no, there's this example where these people did this thing and it was amazing and loads of money was saved, and you will get some pushback. And common responses are things like, that's from 2006, is there anything more recent? Or that's the same example I always hear mentioned, hasn't anyone done anything new? Or more commonly, but they're not like us. So if you have a really good example, but it's from a unitary and actually you're a district, then you'll get that, but they've got different resources, or they've got a different structure. But they do something else, that we don't do. But we've got more responsibilities than them. So do your best to find an example that is as relevant as possible to your organisational structure and responsibilities. If there doesn't seem to be one, if sort of half an hour's Googling doesn't turn up something, if everybody comes up blank, use your networks. And I'm just going to go straight back to the point about, this is about people, this is about relationships and conversations and understanding what else is happening in this space. So use your networks. Local Government Association, I'm sure, will be happy to come up with specifics. And again, we've got that transparency at local.gov.uk. Don't be afraid to use that to drop them a line and say, right, I'm all fired up, I'm ready to go. Have you got any examples that relate to my specific situation? And also use networks like Local Gov Digital. So if you're a Local Gov person, we are digital, techie, web and data type people, but we are always delighted to welcome everybody and anybody who works in Local Gov to talk about the issues that we all have in common. So that is a really good network for asking this sort of question, just saying, I have this situation, has anybody tackled this? Does anybody know how this went, and are they in a similar sort of authority to me, and can I use that as an example case? So I'm always happy to talk. And there are also events like there's Local Gov Camp, which is non-conference for local gov people, and there's Open Data Camp, which is non-conference for people who like data and open data and transparency. And both of those are happening later this year, so have a look out for those. If you want details on those, drop us a line at either of the two email addresses we've already mentioned, and I'll supply some details. I think we'll be sending information out afterwards, which is what we usually do. Yeah, good. Right, so that's the where better use of data has helped. Just scroll up and just check again whether we have any questions.
Yeah, so we have a question from Nick in Aberdeen who says, an issue may be that you have a general solution, so you may need to narrow down the problem based on the audience and tailor it to the audience.
Yeah.
And he's asking, would an information needs analysis help with this narrowing and defining of the problem?
Information needs analysis. I haven't heard that phrase for a while. So I'm thinking that information needs analysis is that you've got some sort of template that would give you the, I need to know this, therefore I need to look for the other thing. But yes, I think so. If you have a general solution, but you don't yet know what problem it's solving, then my opinion is you're probably approaching it backwards. That if you have a solution or a proposal, product or whatever it is in mind, but you're not sure who it's going to help and why, then you haven't had enough conversations yet. So by all means, information needs analysis sounds like a good thing to do, but talking to people is always my default position. So go talk to some people. Go talk to some people on the sharp end of data usage, whether they're frontline staff, whether they are people who are receiving reports, whether they are directors of services or internal services like HR and finance and so on and so forth, and say, I think this is a good thing to do for all sorts of reasons, but I'd like to see if there are specific cases where it can help. And that serves a double purpose, because that then also gives you pilot areas. If somebody says, yes, I agree, it looks interesting, and it might work on this particular issue that I have, then you have there like a ready-made prototyping area. And they've made a new friend who will help you prove the concept. I hope that helps sort of answer the question a bit.
A little clarification on information needs,
Okay.
Something that looks at things like subject, function, quality, etc. But I would challenge you, and I would say information needs analysis, is that not talking to people and working out what their needs are?
If it's the same thing, then definitely do that. And anything that involves actually talking to someone and getting to the bottom of a problem that they're facing, for me, is always a good move. Always a good move. Right, any follow-up questions on that one? No, okay, right, then we shall scroll up a bit.
You haven't done that one.
I haven't done that one? Oh, I haven't, sorry, beg your pardon. See, I'm completely off track. This is, everybody, this is why Emily is here. She is to point out if I go off track, which happens, if I talk too much, which also happens, or if I forget where I've got to, which, as you've seen, also does happen. So you have this problem that you are proposing to solve. You've got this proposal that you think is going to be the answer. You have a list of all the benefits that this can bring. If you've worked in local government more than 5 minutes, you all know that even that is not necessarily enough. It may look like a total no-brainer, but again, you will get that pushback. Well, somebody will say, why is this the thing that we need to do? Convince me that I actually need to take an action and do this thing. And the other options that people may push back and try to suggest are likely to be, let's do nothing. Let's just say we'll just continue coping as we are. We won't make any changes. We've managed so far. We'll just hang in there. Other suggestions might be, well, can we just do the bare minimum so we don't have to use all this resource? Can we just can we get the cheapest tier of the service? Can we do it for free for now? Can we get by with just one license for the whole organisation? You know the sorts of arguments that we get. You can all sing along when you know the words. You've all heard this before, that we say, I've got this amazing idea, and somebody will say, oh, yeah, but we can't afford to do it to that degree, or we can't afford to do that this quarter or this financial year. Can we just not, effectively? So this part of the pitch, and remembering that you've got 90 seconds approximately to boil this into something that's really compelling, convincing. This part of the pitch is about, this is why this is the right thing to do right now. This is the best possible option. To say, if we do nothing, then something will fall apart in a big way, something will break in a big way. And I think this morning one of the mentions was the General Data Protection Regulation, right? So I've just been calling it GDPR and I keep forgetting what it actually stands for. Doing nothing is not an option around stuff like that. We have to be on top of that. And there are some new duties and powers in the Digital Economy Act. And again, where doing nothing is not an option. At the very least, we have to examine where we stand with any changes in that legislation. So we have to make it clear, doing nothing won't work. Doing nothing will not just have a standstill. We will be seriously disadvantaged if we do nothing at this point. Then you have to also make sure that you dismiss the half-hearted effort, the can we just do the cheap option, or can we just can we get a consultant in instead, or so on and so forth. So make sure that you've researched those options and you've got a couple of really short sentences that just say, if we do nothing, that will not be okay. If we do a cheaper option, or if we get a consultant in, or we wait until we can hire an extra person and they can do all the work, that won't work either. And this is why. Be absolutely clear that the thing that you're proposing, you have done that research. You can back that up later with more detail if you need to, but you can quite clearly state these other options are not as good as the thing that I'm proposing, and this is why. Okay. Right, now I can move on. Covered that bit. And then this is the critical thing, that you're going to have thought about everything you're going to say. Make sure it boils down to sort of a 90-second pitch. But it'll all be for nothing if you then walk away from that conversation without having said, and this is what I need. So we have this problem, I have this proposal, I think it's very good. I've seen it work elsewhere in a very similar situation. It's a better alternative than the other things that we might do in response. And what I need from you is. So again, this can be tailored depending on who you're talking to. If you're watching the screen, you can see that on the module there are some things that you can expand to look at the detail. Again, I'm not going to make you listen to me read those things out. You can take a look at those where you are yourself. But the critical things about this next action, it's got to be something that's within their power to give. So it's no good asking somebody on the front line if they think that you might be able to get another 50 grand in the budget. Probably not within their power, so probably not a thing to ask. On the other hand, if you're talking to a head of service, you might be saying, could we do some sort of feasibility study into hiring another individual to help with this? If you're talking to IT, then you could well be saying, is there a possibility we can set up a sandbox area so that I can do some technical scoping around using this particular tool that I'm interested in? It's got to be something that person can say yes to, or at least say yes to discussing in more detail later. It's got to be reasonable, so don't go asking for a pony. That doesn't work. I've tried that. And then that's just to soften them up, and then I ask for the real thing that I want. But yeah, not always effective. It's got to be a reasonable request. You can't have another £2 million. You can't have the latest shiny kit for everybody. You can't hire another 10 people. Actually, what is the thing that you need? It's got to be something that it's quite clear what they're committing to. So can we get together in the next week and have IT in the room so we can discuss this option? That's a clear expectation. Am I free in that time period? Yes. Do I know that I can get someone from IT in? Yes. Okay, I can say yes to that. That's okay. And they can respond to that on the spot. You walk away from that conversation, not with, I'll get back to you next week if I think I can do something, but rather, yes, that sounds like a good idea. That sounds like something we need to talk about. I will try and get the right people together, or I will take a look at your feasibility study or your options paper this week and get back to you by Monday. Okay, so those are the crucial things. It's got to be something you say yes to. It's got to be a reasonable thing, something that's within their power, and with clear expectations. So they know just what it is that they've just said yes to. So that kind of covers the module content. Below that, you've got there are quick questions just to check that check your understanding of what's in the module. Nice simple stuff. It's not just like a quiz. It's not to catch you out or anything. So at this point, I'm going to stop screen sharing. Let me check how we're doing for time.
It's 25
half an hour. Yeah, so we're about 25 minutes. So I talk for longer than usual, which is actually not unusual. I'm going to stop sharing and come back to here and take a swig of my tea so I don't dry out. And over to you for any questions or any things you want to expand on at all.
So there's currently a little bit of a debate going on between kind of the role of the pitch, if you like. Some people saying that it's this should be really, really simplistic thing, which I personally agree with, because you're trying to get support or approval or something, and often from people who are quite senior or people who don't. If they got data, you wouldn't be having to convince them anyway.
Yeah.
And then there was a comment saying that sometimes the problem is then explaining the magnitude of the work behind the simple and the result that's then been sold.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. That on the one hand, you can feel absolutely great because, oh, you know, I've got the point across and I absolutely support the thing that I want to do. But you've done a little bit too good a job in selling your simple message and the benefits, and people are like, well, that sounds really easy. Why haven't you done it already? When actually getting our data properly under control, tidied up, clean, up to date, robust, stored in a way that we can access it and share it more easily is actually, it's a bit of a magically ever expanding task, and we probably will never be done. We'll just reach a level where we're better at it than we used to be. So yeah, it can be problematic that to gain support without frightening people with the amount of work that there is, but at the same time being realistic. I don't have an easy answer for that one. It is a balancing act. It's about being clear about what is the next thing that needs to be done and what will make the most difference, I think is probably the most helpful thing.
Another problem, be aware of your success, as in, I suppose this is quite similar.
Yeah.
You press the button and fix all of their problems. Can you do the same for us?
Yes. Yes, I've had that one. Yes, that is a problem. That is absolutely a problem. If you're awesome and you make it look easy, then people will think it is easy, and it can be difficult to convince people that just because you manage to, for instance, put together a prototype, that doesn't mean the job is finished. People do say, well, I can see the thing, it's there and it's working. That means it's done, right? Yeah, it's fixed. You have to explain that actually no, because that's not using live data, that's a spreadsheet, and at which point people tend to glaze over because you just like went beyond their technical comfort level. So there are discussions that you have with people who aren't really into data about, those tend to be about access and about communication, about presentation, and then there are discussions that you have about making sure the infrastructure is really, really ready for the thing that you want to do, and those are the discussions that you have with ICT and with finance and with data owners and people who collect and store and hold data, and information governance being another example. Make sure that you have a certain level of confidence that you're going to be able to get the infrastructure and the data quality stuff moving, if not done, at the same time as you're talking elsewhere about the strategic resource implications. So
one more comment. So thanks, Louise, for all your comments. She says, much of this shows the need for good knowledge of your organisation and senior and influential staff and strong internal networks, which I think echoes something that you've been saying a lot throughout this.
Yep, there we go. Used this a lot this morning as well. It's all about people.
And then, of course, communicating, you didn't just push the button, that you work with them to help them solve their problems. So it's being open and transparent about that process. Talking about open and transparency on the process, I swear Tim is just trolling you now. He says, does any of this stuff get discussed on GitHub? I think it's because you haven't mentioned GitHub. It's been the only one.
GitHub. No, I mention it and Tim's not happy. I don't mention it and he trolls me.
I mean, that could be a legitimate question.
I'm going to answer that as if it were a legitimate question, and you may consider yourself justly served, Tim. Yes, so do we discuss these things on GitHub? No, because we use GitHub to share data. There you go.
So where would you go to discuss these kind of problems in your network?
Actually at Devon, I would, well, yeah, so in my organisation, and this came up again this morning, people asked how I tackle these sorts of problems, especially from a viewpoint of being quite junior. So 15 odd years ago when I joined the organisation and I was a single data person, looking after a particular database in an isolated service area that was in a satellite office away from County Hall. And being quite junior, you don't have the influence, you don't get to bump into important people in the corridors, and how do you deal with that without looking like you're getting ideas above your station? So not everybody is as bolshy as I am, which is probably a relief. I tend to ignore hierarchies and just go talk to the people I want to talk to. It hasn't always made me friends, but mostly it has. But the important thing was getting in contact with other data people, making a point of, if they couldn't come to me, sort of off outside of County Hall, then I would find ways to be at County Hall occasionally, just often enough to bump into people, to pick people's brains, to go and solve specific technical issues and find out who knows what about what systems, what technologies, what data sets, what might be available. And build a friendship and collegiate network of people who know stuff. And I've maintained that, always maintained that. And it is very much about knowing who to talk to. Now, in later years, I've had more opportunities to get right out of the office and so come to London, visit other cities, go to conferences and unconferences, and made an even wider network of smart people who know stuff, whether they work in local government or in different areas. And obviously social media and networks and things like so Twitter, Slack, which we use quite a lot, which is sort of instant messaging and resource sharing. All of that sort of thing means you can keep in touch with a very, very wide network of very diverse, very smart people much more easily. But those relationships, what I find, always begin by a face-to-face meeting. So conference, after conference drinks, chatting in a queue, whatever it might be. You make friends face-to-face if you possibly can, and then maintain those relationships using whatever tools and means you have. And that's incredibly valuable. And that's the single thing that makes the most difference to the way that I've been able to work and the way that really effective people that I know manage to work, is that they have that network.
Cool. So another comment saying a successful 2-minute corridor pitch could require a couple of months' work, educating people about what you can and can't do.
Yep.
And then we've got a question, are there any tricks for a pitch where you're working with several data partners? Does that make it different? For example, Devon County Council and district councils.
Yeah, good question. So calling it tricks makes it sound like we're trying to sort of take advantage of people, which sounds like the wrong approach, but I get what you mean there. No, there's no special trick. It begins with the same thing that everything begins with, and my note here, what problem are you solving? So if it's not your own problem that you're solving, but actually you're trying to gain support from a group of partners, and some of those people are not in your organisation, and they may have other issues that they're facing, is actually what is it about the thing that you want to do that is going to help them too? So what problems are they facing? So, right, I'm going to get this printed on a t-shirt. It's still about people. It's about finding out what problems those people have. What is the context of the work that they're trying to do? What is the context of the data that they're collecting? What things are they facing day to day? And how can the thing that you want to do help with that? So it is still very, very much about understanding, having some empathy for their point of view, for the issues that they face. So, I mean, the example that I used this morning, and this is an internal one, but the point is valid, is that when we decided that we would take a punt on using GitHub to publish some of our open data sets, and we picked on the spend over £500 data, that was a thing that we wanted to do because we feel GitHub is a good solution right now, because it is it's a free way for us to share the data. It is a really good platform for that particular data set because it's used by people who code. GitHub is a platform for sharing resources for people who code. So developers like that. But also it worked really, really well for 2 or 3 other groups involved. So finance, who have to get the data. There are smart data and techie people in finance who love that idea because they can automate the extracts straight into GitHub. So it's a whole load of manual processing just cut right out with that one step. It really worked for the digital people who used to have to manually go get that file and publish it to a web page, and they had to find somewhere to store it and had to go into the content management system. So they loved it because they're now completely out of the loop. That is a job they don't even have to do anymore. And finally, ICT now don't have to find server space for 2 years worth, so a monthly file for the last 2 years worth of really, really big CSV files, and they now don't have to find storage space. So that's 3 whole groups who are now really, really happy with that solution because we took time to talk to them and say, we want to do it this way, but actually, what does that mean for you? Is this a good solution for you? And if one of them had said, no, that's going to add a massive amount to my workload, and it's unacceptable, I'm sorry, that just isn't going to happen, and we would have backed off and found another way. There's no point pushing the latest shiny techie solution if you are then adding like a whole nother 30 man hours of work to somebody's team and they simply don't have the resource, or turning it into a marathon slog that before they didn't have to do. That's not friendly. So it is about understanding the problems, and that counts whether it's Fred at the next desk, your own chief executive, or 5 partners from district councils plus the NHS. It's valid that you work out what your proposal, what the thing you want to do is going to mean in terms of other people's issues and concerns, and how can you make sure that what you're doing is going to help them too. That was a really long answer to that question.
You surprised me, Lucy.
Okay.
Sarcasm. So we've got a couple of comments. I'll give you some highlights. So often local government data projects bring benefits well downstream, so well beyond the remit of local gov. So it can be difficult to convince councils because they don't see the benefits directly. Mm-hmm. What would you say your response is to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's absolutely true. Is that some of the things that we want to do and want to make changes, we're not going to see the benefit immediately. It may be 4 or 5 years down the line that we really reap the benefits, but by and large, there are usually some short-term benefits that you can pull out. And again, this is about understanding that whole space, who's involved. If somebody has to do more work now, has to face more challenges now because it's going to be better generally or in the long run for other people, then they're going to be possibly quite aggrieved. So is there something, you go talk, no, is it? People. Go talk to them and find out if there is some way that you can make this work in short term, some short-term benefit for them. And then maybe that there's something they really wanted to get rolling that you can perhaps support alongside the thing that you're doing. So again, it's understand that whole space, understand what it's like for everybody involved if you possibly can. Because there is nearly always some benefit, even if it's a longer term one, that people can sign up to, even if they're not the people who originally initiated this thing and they're not the people who originally thought of as the ones who are going to benefit.
Comment from Craig on that saying it's all about the outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And how you can actually benefit others, which perhaps you could argue is the entire point of the public sector.
Yeah.
Particularly, in terms of achieving. Is it in corp plan? Is that corporate plan?
Yeah.
Okay. Trust your local gov speak here.
Local gov jargon, yes, absolutely.
And then there's a bit of chat about the GDPR, which we can go into if nobody else has any questions. Yeah, I guess we can cover GDPR. So what is GDPR, Lucy?
Oh, I am not up to speed on this, so I'm going to cheat and I'm going to read Tim's comments.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, substantial new public sector data protection regulations. So it looks like it's going to have more teeth than the current regulation, which is good.
So it's expanding out what personal data is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a European Union directive, although maybe that will become irrelevant to us.
Maybe.
But for the time being, anyway, we have to adhere to it. Mm-hmm. So they're expanding the definitions of personal data. So it's not just things that it is currently, things like your gender, your name, things that are very obvious. It's making that wider. Mm-hmm. It's not what effects that's going to have on individual businesses and organisations and with government as well is not entirely clear at the moment, because they're still changing parts of it. But yeah, as Tim said, it's going to come out in 2018. I think it's May 2018. And the LGA is doing a lot of work on that and making sure that the government is ready for that. So I think if you have any questions on GDPR, particularly in the context of local government, to get in contact with Tim and Alex Marshall at transparency@local.gov.uk, and they will be able to help you there.
And I think that this came up this morning again as potentially something that will help you make the case for making some changes to the way that you handle data. That if GDPR is definitely going to be applicable to us, if it's something we're going to have to abide by, then we have just under 2 years now to get our act together, basically.
1 year. We're in 2017.
Are we?
Yes.
How long have I been asleep? 1 year. Just under 1 year to get ready for this, and it's even less time than I originally thought. And yeah, having a better idea of where our data is, what our data is, and whether or not we've attained the right permissions for the things we want to do with it, we don't have long. So when we were talking about why is this the fourth point in the pitch, why is this the best option, why is this the thing that we should do, the doing nothing is not an option is even stronger if you look at that and say the Digital Economy Act as well. Doing nothing is not an option because we have these new things that we must consider and these new powers that we may take advantage of. So it just adds a little bit more power to that argument that we have to do something, we have to do better.
Yeah.
Okay. So other than forgetting what year it is, I think that went really well, didn't it?
So we have got 9 minutes. So is there anything else you want to say? I can come up with some questions if you want. Otherwise, do drop your questions into the chat.
Yeah, I think I've covered all the points that I've got post-its for, which if you could see this table, it's basically covered with post-its. So what else has come up in there?
Still chatting about
Yes.
GDPR.
Oh yeah, so Tim is making
said.
the point that he's raised it because it's bringing data to the attention of managers and senior people who normally would not have data on their minds. So on the one hand, that is a good thing because it's putting that focus on the area that we've always known is important. On the other hand, it's likely to panic some people and they may sort of pick up and memorize a couple of phrases and then sort of run around screaming, saying we have to do something, which may be counterproductive. So now is a really good time to be saying, yes, this all ties into what I've been talking about this whole time, so we need to do this, and it gives that extra backup to the things that we need to do.
So I suppose I would just ask a question to you, people listening, watching, is actually what would you like to do next, really? Where would you like to see your continued training and development in this area? Obviously, this isn't a question for right now. I know that Tim and Alex at the LGA would love to get your feedback to see what they can do next. So this is the 6th webinar that we've run in this series, although that's 2 of every webinar, so really it's 3 webinars. We did run another 3 beforehand as well. They tie up to the 6 learning modules. Do go and have a look at them in more detail if you haven't already looked at them. And of course, there's loads of examples and case studies there of different stories of better use of data that you can use. The other thing that is a bit of a plug for some work that I'm doing is currently a survey into training needs analysis of people in government around the world. I really can't do the words like you can. I'm tripping over my words left, right, and centre.
You know what day it is. So.
But I know what day it is. So that's training needs analysis, so that's data training needs analysis around the world. So we will send out the survey at the end of this. If you do have time, it should take about 5, maybe 7 minutes to complete, and it would really help us to build up a big picture of data training needs of people in government. And we will, if permission is given, be releasing all the de-identified responses as open data.
Excellent. I see something's just popped up. Can we refresh on the GitHub bit? Sure. Yes, I'm not sure what the question is. What do we need to know about GitHub?
Possibly how you can use GitHub. One thing I would say is that GitHub themselves have some excellent free tutorials, because I'm not that up there with my GitHub knowledge, and we do use it at the ODI, so I'm trying to teach myself. They have some excellent tutorials that are free. Because it's all entirely open source and it's very open community, there's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, Lucy will be able to give some tips and tricks very quickly. But there are great tutorials out there.
Yeah, there are. It's very, very supportive community, because it's based around so developing open source software and being able to collaborate on code. So it's a perfect environment for sharing data as well, alongside anything you may have built with it, any dashboards or whatever. So it's a great way, if you know that there is a developer community really interested in your data. As I say, this is what we found around spend data. That is people who really do know how to code and want to build web services and apps, surfacing our spend data and adding extra value into it and adding extra context into it with other data. What it basically gives you is just a way that you can share stuff and you have absolute control over what is done with it. Now, people can, if you put a data set on GitHub and you share it through GitHub, because the platform is designed for people to collaborate on writing code, and you can have different versions, but there's always one true version, which there's a perfect audit trail of who's made what changes. That means if you're at all nervous about sharing open data, GitHub can be a good solution once you've got to grips with the mechanics of actually using it. It can be a good solution because you can put that data out there and people can take a copy and they can do whatever they want, subject to licensing conditions and legal requirements. But your version always stays as it was. And there's this audit trail saying who has taken a copy, so it's a good way for metrics, who's using this. And you can always tell whether any changes have been made and who have made those changes. So if people say, I don't want to publish a particular data set because I'm afraid of what people might do with it, and people are going to do what they're going to do. But you can always point back to your version and say, you can see that this is the original data set. So if these people are saying this is what's going on based on our data set, well, you can look at the raw data and you can look at the original copy. And you have absolute confidence that that hasn't been messed with, because it's easily visible to see if any changes have been made or anything is different about it from when it was first put out. What we found is, at the moment, it gives us a free way to publish a limited number of data sets. And GitHub do have limits on the amount of data you can start putting in the free spaces. If you take the mickey and try and put like hundreds of gigabytes out there, then they may have an issue. But if you're talking about just to get started, to build some confidence, they're quite fine with that. But again, as Emmy says, there are tutorials, they're really helpful. They've got sort of frequently asked questions sheets, you can go take a look at that. And if they're very basic, if literally all you want to do is have a document that says this is my data set, this is what it's about, and here's the actual file itself, CSV with some data in, it's quite straightforward to do. Hope that helps. Was that what you were looking for? Hopefully. Okay, excellent.
Okay, so that's it.
That's it.
That's our last.
We're about done.
That's our last webinar.
That's our last webinar. It's been amazing. If this has been helpful, fantastic. If you have any questions that we didn't cover, either of the email addresses we already mentioned, these guys know how to get in touch with me if you want to follow up with me, or if you specifically want ODI information or LGA information, again, use those email addresses. And thank you very much for watching and listening, and for all your questions and comments. Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.